Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're tuning in, my name is Kenny Francis. I am the Vice President of Indivisible New Orleans. We are having the first of our school board, Orleans Parish School Board forums. We're going to have forums for all but one of the races, and we're excited about that. This is part of a series that we're doing of candidate forums leading up to November elections. Our goal here is to make sure that people have the information that they need to be informed voters and to make a choice that they feel is best for their community come November 3rd. And a big part of that is understanding who the candidates are, why they're running, what they're about, and what they're trying to do. And so that's what we're going to be doing with these forums. Before we jump into our forum tonight with our guests, and before I get to tonight's guests, a couple of housekeeping things. First, if you have any questions tonight, you can, as you can see at the bar in your screen, you can submit them at Slido. That's slido.com. The event code is District 1. I will see those questions pop up and I will get to as many of them as I can. That's the first thing. Second thing, if you like to keep up with the forums and all of the events and all of the information that we're sending out from Indivisible NOLA, you can subscribe to our newsletter. That's you can subscribe to the newsletter at indivisibleNOLA.com. If you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll get updates about forums, you get updates about anything that we're doing. We always send out an update through the newsletter, so it's a great way to keep up with us. Or you can follow us on our social media feeds on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. One last housekeeping thing. I want to remind folks that we have a bunch of forums coming up, specifically this week. So tonight we have Dr. Sentino from District 1. Tomorrow we have 4 of the 5 candidates from District 2 of the Orleans Parish School Board tomorrow night at the same time at 7:30 to 8:30. On Tuesday night of this week, we're going to be having a forum about the judge races. So we'll be voting on a bunch of different judgeships this fall, criminal district court, civil court, juvenile justice. So we're having a forum with a bunch of the candidates running for the different judgeships on Tuesday. That will be Tuesday at 6 o'clock, sorry. And then the third forum that we have this week is on Thursday evening. We have a forum with the district attorney candidates that's called the Forum for Safe Communities and Against Gender-Based Violence. So that's going to be a forum with the DA candidates specifically about women's issues. And so those are the forums that we have coming up this week. Sorry, 4 forums. It's Sunday, y'all. And Dr. Sentino has had a long day, so we're going to try to get her out of this early. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guests tonight. So tonight we're talking about District 1 of the Orleans Parish School Board. With us is Dr. Patrice Sentino, who's one of the 2 candidates running in this race. I just want to give a disclaimer to folks who are tuning in that Mr. John Brown, who's the incumbent in this race, did not get back to us when we reached out to him multiple times to participate in this. So we reached out to Dr. Sentino and let her know that she would be the only one and asked her if she wanted to move forward and have the opportunity to talk with her. And she said yes. So this is going to look a little bit different than our other candidate forums, because rather than trying to make sure that we share the mic and have everyone have a fair amount of time to talk, obviously with just one person, there's going to be plenty of time for that. And so Dr. Sentino and I are going to have a much more informal conversation than we will in the other candidate forums, just because we have the time with her. So with that, thank you for joining us, Dr. Sentino.
Yes, Kenny, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure. And just to jump right in.
Sure, absolutely.
I'm Dr. Patrice Sentino, candidate for Orleans Parish School Board District 1. District 1 covers parts of New Orleans East and the lower 9th Ward east of the Industrial Canal. I have really dedicated and committed my life really over 25 years working with children and families. I have tirelessly advocated for those affected by social and environmental trauma, mental and behavioral health, as a licensed clinical social worker, mental health provider, educator, and researcher. I continue my efforts to eliminate racial inequities in education and mental health. After Hurricane Katrina, I worked closely with Orleans Parish Schools to provide trauma-informed care and practices to teachers, training them, counseling to students and families, as well as meeting children and parents from a social emotional perspective. Also, I worked at Orleans Parish Juvenile Court, where I was the director of the Family in Need of Services program, FINS. And there I saw many under-resourced youth become casualties of the school of prison pipeline. And so my time at juvenile court, I worked to transform a system of punishment into a rehabilitative one. I work with stakeholders around the country, the Juvenile Justice Alternative Initiative, with stakeholders around the country to work to transform juvenile court into a model system. In my time at juvenile court, I saw many children that were mischaracterized as having oppositional or deviant behaviors. And so that's where Center for Hope was birthed out of. Center for Hope is a outpatient behavioral mental health agency where I am the CEO and owner of. And so my time here at Center for Hope, I am continuing to do the work, working with families, working with students, working with community stakeholders. Over the past 12 years, Center for Hope has actually provided services to over about 10,000 children and families, like I said, within the course of 12 years. And so I am passionate about doing the work.
Patrice Sentino, sorry to interrupt you. You froze there for a second. So if you can like sort of back up like 5 seconds.
Okay. I just said Center for Hope. Center for Hope, we have actually serviced about 10,000 children and families over the course of 12 years. So I'm passionate about doing the work. Also, I am an assistant professor in the School of Social Work at Southern University, SUNO. Educational background, I hold a master's in social work from SUNO, a doctorate in social work from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, as well as completing a second doctorate in educational psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And so I am running for school board because I believe in the importance of ensuring that every child receives a high quality education. In order to be successful, we need to make sure that we increase low performing schools, that each child has the opportunity to attend a high performing school, as well as definitely we know that school board members, they have to make sure that they are innovative, have creative ideas. That is me. I am one. Being a researcher, I am aware of the current educational trends, technology. We definitely need to make sure that we are infusing these programs and systems into the school board. And so also, as well as making sure our resources are invested in the classrooms, and then our tax dollars are being used appropriately. And so, like I said, I am running for school board because of the importance of ensuring that every child receives a quality education and expanding high performing schools. And so that's what's important to me. And of course, I have various things on my platform. One in particular is making sure that we increase and promote parental engagement. Parents should be at the forefront. They are the experts of their own experience. And so we should leverage the voices of our parents. We should leverage the voices of our students and teachers. And one other thing that I'm really passionate about is ensuring that social and mental health is a priority for all of our kids. We must focus on the critical issues of mental health in all aspects of our education system. And so whether that looks like trauma, life events, adverse life events for some of our kids, we definitely need to make sure that we are providing that care to them. We know that research notes that when children feel safe, they are in a safe environment, that increased student performance and academic outcome and growth. And so definitely we need to move towards providing more trauma-informed care and practices in the schools.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sentino. I'm gonna let you take a deep breath there. So with this, a couple things. So one, I think one of the best ways to go about this is I was taking notes while you were talking, and I would love to just sort of go through a couple of those things and ask you to be more specific and talk about what you view the role of a board member is and how you hope to go about those things and have you flesh out some of those things more. But I think first I want to ask you more of an overarching question. So you covered who you are, you covered why you're running for school board. My question for you is that and for a note for our viewers is, as a reminder, we have a unique district in the country. We have a district that is known as a portfolio district. It's decentralized, meaning that unlike most school districts that you see, there isn't a top-down approach where you have a superintendent and an administration that sort of says, here's what's going to happen and everyone has to do it. We have a system of charter schools that have a lot of autonomy over things like their budgets, things like their staffing, things like what curriculum they're going to implement. And so our school board members don't look like typical school board members because there's a little bit different governance structure. And so my first question for you is, given our different governance structure as a system, and given that school board members in our city don't look like your typical school board member in another city that may have a more top-down approach, what do you view is your role as a board member? What I mean by that question is that, like, in other districts, it's very simple, right? In other districts, you're an elected official whose job is to hire and oversee a superintendent, and you push down policy from a very top-down way. That's not how it functions here. So, like, what do you view as a role of a board member in our decentralized system?
Well, and there are some parts that does look like a traditional school board. Of course, we know some of the pieces are missing when we talk about autonomy, when we talk about directly running schools, but there are some pieces that are relatively the same as traditional, such as developing strategic plans, policies, definitely to promote high quality education, hiring the superintendent, evaluating, monitoring the superintendent's performance, holding the superintendent accountable. So we do know that those are some things that we can't get away from being a school board member. But, you know, the school board initiates educational policies, definitely looks at monitoring the performance of charter management organizations in schools. We definitely have to make sure that we continue to do that because it is the responsibility, and Orleans Parish School Board or the district cannot absolve itself from any large leverage change that can take place as it relates to turning this school district around or changing the face of the district. And so we still have to provide some level of leadership to our local schools. And then, of course, we know fiduciary, making sure resources are going or invested into our classrooms, that we are adhering to a budget that supports what we're doing, resources, programs, meeting special needs. So those are the things that I find that is important for a school board member, and should be priority. And also, we definitely, it's important that we leverage relationships within the community. So much in the past, we have had relationships where people, they question accountability, transparency. And so it is our job to make sure that we restore that accountability and transparency.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And now let's jump into some of the specifics here and use as much of our time as we can, as wisely as we can. So you mentioned that you did a lot of work in the juvenile justice system and you worked in juvenile court. And so I imagine that you are planning on having a focus on that in terms of keeping kids out of the system as a board member. Can you talk to us a little bit about what do you hope to do, specifically as a school board member, to disrupt the school to prison pipeline that you mentioned before?
Definitely. And so to disrupt school to prison pipeline, we know that there's a lot of talk about police in the schools, right? Police in the schools. There's a lot of talk about that, not just New Orleans, but nationwide. And so one of my thoughts about putting police in schools, we need to be very careful because we don't want to over-criminalize the schools, right? We don't, first of all. And also, research has stated that white children feel more safe when police in schools, but Black African American children, it's the opposite. They don't feel safe when police are in the school. So we definitely, if we're talking about ending school to prison pipeline, we don't want to overcriminalize the system, for one. We definitely want to make sure that we have folks sitting at the table that are interested in juvenile justice reform and providing that collaborative relationship, because we don't have the monopoly on all the answers. So we have to bring people in. We have to look at evidence-based. I am evidence-based driven. So I like to look at what is happening in other states, what is happening around the country, what are some model programs that we can bring in to end school to prison pipeline, to look at the disproportionality in student disciplinary, making sure we look at policies and practices, making sure that there's no discriminatory practices that will continue to perpetuate school or prison pipeline. So those are some things that I definitely will want to do, have round discussion tables, bringing folks in, juvenile judges, transformative rehabilitative programs such as FINS, and having them a part of the discussion along with the schools and school leadership.
Thank you for that. And I think that flows nicely into the next question I had from what you were talking about, is your focus that you said you wanted to have on mental health supports. Can you talk a bit specifically about what supports do you see that would you want to push for as a board member? What specifically would you want to see happening in schools to better support our kids' mental health?
Yeah, one thing that I definitely would like to see is a unified, universal, system-wide trauma-informed care and practices that's embedded in the schools, whether it looks like it's embedded in the curriculum, school practices, because we know trauma-informed care could be utilized using different pedagogical techniques and methods. Also bringing resources and assessments in so that teachers can be trained. For instance, there's this assessment tool called Cognito. Cognito is a tool that's used nationwide, and it's a tool that's utilized to help teachers to train them how to identify trauma and emotional well-being of students. And so getting teachers trained, utilizing Incognito is almost like an avatar. And so it is set up where you have the student and the teacher. And so it guides that teacher on how to identify what to say, what not to say, to get teachers trained and leaders on trauma-informed care and practices. Because right now, after Hurricane Katrina, many children, like I said earlier, suffered from stress and trauma, right? And we saw that play out. And now we have COVID-19. I am still counseling, working directly with children and families, and I hear the stories of a child has lost their grandparents or their friend or someone close, and parents are scared of them going back into the school and how they're going to manage and cope because they're not doing well because of COVID-19, whether it's socially, whether it's grief, all of those different things. And so we need to also be able to hear from the parents. The parents need to be involved in this process of how do we reach your child, and hearing from the parents. So those are some things that I definitely, when I talk about trauma-informed caring practices, is bringing assessment tools in to train teachers. We need to have ongoing trainings on that, on trauma-informed care, even parents. So those are just some things that I want to focus on, a system-wide approach to meeting children where they are, socially and emotionally. We have to look at things through a social emotional perspective, because if we know anything about Maslow hierarchy of learning, right? We know if a child doesn't feel safe, if they don't feel like they belong, then they don't reach that full potential within themselves. And if a child is going through something environmentally or socially, we can't expect that child to perform in school, concentrate. We know data shows that when children suffer emotionally, it affects their concentration, their ability to retain information. So we have to leverage putting some type of trauma-informed caring practices in our schools and the district.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sentino. And just to reinforce everything you said, I couldn't agree with you more about the need for mental health supports and augmented mental health supports in our schools. As a person who taught in the district for years myself and also worked at the district level, I couldn't agree with you more at just how important that need and big that need is. But I think, and the theme that you're going to notice here in the way that I ask questions, given my background knowledge of the system, is again, in a decentral, I think it's very hard for anyone to argue that anything you said is wrong there about mental health supports and the importance of it. It's really great to hear a school board member really focusing in on that because like you said, it's been a problem in our city for a long time and something that we desperately need better resources for our kids. But given that we are a decentralized district, I would love to hear you talk specifically about, given that schools have autonomy over things like their curriculum. So you want to do trauma-informed practices in schools. How do you get the schools to do that, given it can't just be an edict? You can't just say, we're all going to do trauma-informed practices with all of your staff on these days. So I would love to hear, like, how are you hold, accountable is not the word I'm looking for, but like, how are you going to ensure that it's actually implemented in schools? Like what part of the powers of the school board do you plan on using to do that?
Yeah, I think the important thing is, because we do have a decentralized and in just the movement to get everyone on one accord, because we know how this decentralized system look. And so it has to be buy-in. We have to get buy-in. And one of the important thing is school board members need to have relationships within their districts, because if it can't start system-wide all at once, then we can start district, right? So I'm passionate about this. So one of the things that I would look to do is developing relationships with all of the schools in my district. I can't directly tell them what they can do, but I can directly give them input, feedback. I can give them resources. I can inform them about current educational trends, and try to work with them to implement and provide data to show how effectively models have been successful. And so relationships is key to anything, because when you have relationships with people are more apt to listen and adapt or adopt if it's new innovation, new ideas. And of course, if we're talking about persistently low performing schools, and I'm saying, hey, this may be something that may boost your performance scores, that's the common goal, because we're all trying to work towards a common goal in making sure that we are providing students with equitable education, and that they are able to attend a high performing school, whether it's in their neighborhood or whether it's a school that's outside of their neighborhood. So we all have the common goal. So I think relationship it's going to be so important. And I don't know that relationships have been in District 1 that has been really in the forefront. And so, in relationships, but being knowledgeable about current trends and what's happening. And so when you can present something in a way and you can get buy-in, right? And then you can get community constituents to get involved, then you begin to look at things from a different perspective and a different lens, and then you get some support that you need to help leverage.
Thank you, Dr. Sentino, for that answer. Switching gears a little bit there. So you mentioned you've now twice mentioned innovation.
Yes.
And you've mentioned sort of giving, with this idea of like giving parents and families a diversity of options for the type of schools that we're supposed to go to. And I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think that in a personal opinion I'm stating here is that like part of the whole point of the system that we have was to do that, was to provide a diversity of options for families, so that families, if you're looking for a certain type of learning for your kid, let's say that you want your kid to be a virtuoso in music. We have things like NOCA that kids can try to apply to. That's a great example of a diversity of option, is that NOCA is a different type of school than most schools that you would visit. And there's a couple of other examples like that. So I want to talk a little about innovation and how the board power has to do this. For folks who don't know, one of the, I would say, core responsibilities of the school board, as you mentioned, Dr. Sentino, is setting policy. One of those policies is authorizing policies. As a district, we are an authorized district where the board votes on who gets a charter and who does not, based upon a process in which people apply for charters and basically say, hey, I have this idea for this school. I want to do X, Y, Z, and here's how I'm going to do it, and here's why I'm like set up to do that. And then through the process that goes through the Orleans Parish School Board staff, and then eventually a vote from the board, they're either approved or they're not. And part of that is the authorizing priorities, which the district says, hey, we're looking for people to submit charter applications for this, and this. So what I would love for you to talk about is like, if you were to become a board member and you're talking about innovation, what would you want to see in the authorizing priorities for the district moving forward for the board that you would be part of?
Definitely, when we look at new authorizers, new schools that are submitting contracts, we definitely want to make sure that they are able to meet the needs of our students, right? We want to, if just say, and then not only meet the needs of our students, but where is the school looking to be located? Because if it's looking to be located in an area that it really doesn't meet the needs or the demographics or the makeup of the people in that area, then we definitely need to look at how we approve that charter and if it's actually going to meet the needs of our students. And so, of course, we are, the whole charter movement was supposed to be able to expand choices for parents. But although there's been, some schools that have increased schools, right? But we know relatively that school choice, we still have very limited school choice, right? We still have very limited expansion choices for students. It doesn't really look different. And so, but definitely school board would want to make sure that when charters come, making sure that they are able to meet the needs of our students, making sure that there would not be any selective per se criteria of accepting students in their schools. We know right now we have some select schools that have selective admission. Well, we don't want that. We want students to be able to attend whatever school that they choose. And so, of course, and we know that's another area with the One App. That's a whole nother area. But definitely want to, first of all, make sure that this school is able to meet the needs, that they have a good plan, a good curriculum that will service the needs of our students, their whole infrastructure, teachers, teacher recruitment, how does that look? And so would want to make sure those things are looked at and looked over.
Gotcha. You mentioned One App, so let's go into it. Tell me more about tell me more about your thoughts on like One App. Are there things that you think that work, things that you think that we need to change? Is there anything specifically you're thinking about the One App in our common enrollment system that you think is or is not working, and your ideas around that?
Yeah, my ideas around the One App process. While it is a centralized, process, and it provides creating a single point of entry for parents, but I don't necessarily think it automatically provides equal access to school choice for every student and every parent. And I think we should continue to, there should be some ongoing monitoring of the process and its improvements to ensure that there are fairness as we talk about the process, that there's fairness when we look at sibling, making sure siblings can stick together. We definitely need to do that. And so, that whole One App process, I would say after a student, does not receive their first, second, or third chance, it's no longer choice, but it's chance. And so if we're talking about offering choice, then we need to look at that process because it's no longer choice, it's chance after that. And so we need a better way to ensure enrollment priorities, like I said, to siblings, students who live near the schools, Also, neighborhood schools can meet the educational needs of their children. Uh, and I support having an outside entity to audit the system, to
Mhm.
ensure that rules are coded correctly and that outcomes are consistent with the enrollment priorities. And so families should be provided with information, tools about the process, understanding the operation. Too many times I hear parents say the process is too complicated, it's too difficult. They should we should provide them with some understanding, goals to learn about the available school options that their children can receive, and instructions for applying for schools and checking those results. So the system may need to look at being simplified, but
Okay.
we definitely need to. Those are my thoughts about the one at.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a couple of things there, and I just want to sort of get into some of them just to clarify. So you mentioned it's sibling priority, which is a part of the system. I think many people can agree that, like, at the end of the day, there is only a certain amount of spots in each school, and so I think that second part of what you talked about is very valid. And I just to make sure I heard you correctly, you're saying that, like, I think the thing that you would like to see happen in one app is that us think about the user side of it, the family side of it, and like, how simple is it for families to actually use it? How well do they understand the process? How much help do they have? I think that was a very interesting point you brought up about families getting education on their choices. Because again, just inputting my own personal experiences in the system, I think something that I saw happen a lot as a teacher is families came to me and were like, "Hey, where should my kid go?" Like, you're a teacher, and me just having to give my opinion. And I think that part of, like, educating families and helping families give understand their options is a huge part of it. Because I agree with you there that that's something that we can do a better job on. And if you're someone who's watching this and is unfamiliar with the process, it is hard for families to find information that's not word of mouth based on their options about specific schools, one school versus another school. You can imagine going to buy a car and just basically only having, like, the opinion of, like, your cousin and your neighbor of, like, whether it's a good car or not, and not really having what you would view as, like, an independent source giving you, well, here's objectively what's true about the car. Like, we have things for that when you are using other things, but we don't really have that for our school. So I agree with you. Some sort of, like, almost like a user guide, like,
Right.
here are all the options in an objective manner, like, make your choice. And so I hear you on that. So let's talk about families, because you brought that up, and you also brought up earlier about increasing parental engagement. What does that look like as a board member? So again, as someone who isn't directly running the school, you're not the school leader, you're not having that kind of day-to-day interactions. What do you think our school board needs to do differently when it comes to engaging families more?
Yeah, and I think promoting parental engagement is really a critical piece of building trust that is centered around robust and consistent efforts that encourage family engagement. And so, of course, research has shown that parental engagement increases student achievement, attendance, and their confidence. And so, when students are and their parents are involved in their whole academic and educational process, we know that they earn higher grades and test scores, and they have better social skills. So one of the things that I would like to do to increase parental engagement is making sure that at charter board meetings that parents are notified in well enough time to participate, not just charter management organizations, but the school board meetings, that we provide opportunities for parents to discuss whether it's district wide or specifically to a district, that we create maybe forums, meetings quarterly to leverage the voices, have meetings at the school for parents to come in and be involved and to bridge that relationship. And so it is very important that we involved and parents are involved, in some of the decision making process. Like I talked about, school disciplinary policies. Why not bring parents into that process to get their feedback on certain processes and procedures as it relates to disciplinary, harass, bullying, anti-bullying policies or harassment policies, leveraging the voice of our parents, because we know research has already said that when parents are involved, it increases students' performance and outcome, and that is our common goal. That's what we want to do.
Thank you. Okay, and so now that we're into the second half of our time here, and thank you so much again for your time. As I promised you, I'm going to try to get you out of here early because you've had a long day.
Are you really?
I'm going to try my best. So here's what we're gonna do. I want to go with just a little bit more of your time here. I'm gonna set a goal for myself that we've done in the next 15 minutes because I know that you've had a long day. It's a lot to ask someone to do a full hour by themselves. I'm gonna do my last couple of questions here on what I would call. Let's get right into the controversial parts. Mm-hmm. So I think it's safe to say that in our city, there is a diversity of opinions about the role of the school board and where our current system stands and what's going well and what's not going well. And there's a couple of things I want to hear your thoughts on that are hot button issues that I don't think that we should hide from as we choose this next board. So let's just jump right in with the first one. Okay. Teachers and unions. Mm-hmm. There is a history of there used to be a centralized teacher union in New Orleans. There is no longer a centralized union that has the ability to collective bargain with the district. Mm-hmm. Given the legal makeup of our district, that actually wouldn't be possible. So if you're watching this and you're unfamiliar, again, going back to the decentralized nature of our system, one of the chief things that charter schools have autonomy over is their staff and their HR practices. And so even the school board doesn't have any say in a legal sense over what charters do in terms of like who they hire, who they fire, salaries, etc. That is an individual charter organization decision. And so a centralized agreement with the district wouldn't actually even make sense in this context. But while it is legal for and allowable for teachers to organize and try to collectively bargain with their charters, there's only a few examples of that in the city. And I think that here's where the contentious part gets in. There are some people who say that like teachers have, they have employee rights. They have the right to organize if they want to. Like, I don't see what the issue is. And then there's other people who feel like there is a specifically anti-organizing of labor culture within our schools and within our charter schools in the system. So I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to ask you to like what you would do. So my statement is that it is true that it is legally allowable for teachers to organize and unionize and collectively bargain with the charter school they work for. Whether or not there's a culture that makes people feel safe doing that and exercising that right is a debatable topic. So as a board member, given that you couldn't authorize a collective bargaining agreement with the district because of the setup, what would you, do you support teachers organizing, one? And two, what would you do to ensure that teachers have the ability to exercise this right if they so choose?
Right. And I would support whatever the teachers, whatever their thoughts are, because when we talk about unionizing, I think this is again where the teachers' voices should be leveraged, because some teachers may not want to unionize and some may. And so I think this is more of a discussion that needs to be had, with the teachers themselves. Now, what I would support, of course, because one of the things that we struggle with in our school is high performing, high qualified, certified teachers, right? And so that is an issue. And so some teachers feel like they're not protected, or they can't speak out without something, retaliation or whatever. And I support the voice of teachers. And I'm going to always support the voices of teachers, because they're on the front line. They are the ones that's doing the work. And so they should be heard. They should be respected. And so, but at large, we need to leverage the voices. We need to hear what the teachers, because like I said, some may be for unionizing, some may not. And so, but regardless of standing up and advocating for teachers. I'm going to always advocate that their voices be heard without any type of lashback or, you know, um, anything that would go against, teachers not feeling safe to talk about what is happening in their schools or their experience or whatever. We want to make sure that we're providing that for our teachers in a safe place and a safe space. And so I'm going to support and advocate for that.
Thank you for that. Okay, I got two more contentious ones for you, then I'm gonna let you go. I'll let you enjoy whatever's left of your Sunday. So a second thing that is contentious is there's a lot of conversation in our city about economies of scale, where in this world of autonomy, you have things like charters have autonomy over their budgets, they have autonomy over the way that special education is evaluated, and the services are provided. Transportation is a big one that they have autonomy over. Things like that. So I guess there's a conversation where there's two pretty diametrically opposed sides, where there are folks who believe that a centralized district service cannot serve school communities best, and then there are folks who believe that there are things that need to be centralized for economies of scale, for efficiency, for quality. And I would love your thoughts on that. Is like, do you think that there are things in our system that are currently independently done by each charter organization that should be centralized or that could be centralized? And I would just love to hear your thoughts on like those, what are those things are, if there are any.
Well, if we talk about economy of scale, one of the things that if I was to advocate for certain operational costs to be centralized, I would definitely want to look at trauma-informed care and practices being centralized, transportation, centralization of transportation, food services. So those would be some of the things that I would definitely would want to look at as far as being centralized. And so, of course, different programs and initiatives that, and I'm a proponent of trauma-informed care, but those would be some of the things that I would definitely look at with being centralized.
Gotcha. Thank you. And last one for you. I saved the most contentious for last. My last one for you is this conversation about school closure. And so if you're watching this and you're unfamiliar, in New Orleans, which is a bit different than other places, if a school is constantly low performing for X amount of time, because the time is varied, the school board can take an action to close a school, which what typically would mean is that the charter management organization that is running it, their contract is ended, and they're saying you can't run this school anymore. And then we're either closing the school, that means the school will no longer exist, or a different organization is going to come in and run this school. There is obviously a lot of diversity of opinions on this specific topic around school closure. And so my question is a two-part question for you. Is like, one, do you support school closure as an idea? And I'm going to let you answer that first.
And I don't support school closure. School closure has severe ramifications, and it is my belief that it is better for local communities, students, parents, teachers, and the district are better off investing in low-performing schools rather than closing them. We know that school closure causes trauma, and so if we're talking about trying to halt trauma or work with kids, we don't want to impose any more trauma. And so one of the things that school closure does, it disrupts families, it disrupts teachers, and so it causes many layered effects when we talk about school closures.
And so I think what I heard there pretty clear is that you don't support the idea of closing schools outright. So the idea of like a school will no longer exist, everyone else goes to another school. So in the absence of that, if you were a board member and you would be against school closure, what would you do with underperforming schools where kids are not being served in the way that they need to be and they deserve to be served?
Yeah, definitely. I believe a systematic assessment of the unique needs of every school in the district is an important first step if we're looking at low performing schools in developing a sustainable school improvement program or plan, right? And so that includes analyzing data, how effectively schools are using resources to improve educational outcomes or instructional quality, also providing tailored resources to help assist schools in overcoming those challenges. And I think this should be done for a defined period of time. And so once this is done, that gives the school an opportunity for turnaround. However, if the school does not meet or is successful at meeting those needs within that specified, defined time, as in alignment with the accountability framework that has been developed by NOLA Public Schools, I think we definitely, the school board needs to definitely look at closely directly running a school rather than closing.
I gotcha. So to hear you clear, so to repeat back what I think I heard clearly is that rather than the idea of closing any schools outright, for a school that is consistently low performing and not serving kids the way they deserve to be, you would advocate first sort of like a school improvement plan, more investment in this school, and then if transformation, if they cannot be if it cannot improve and has not improved over a specified period of time, you support the school board directly taking over the school and operation of it.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you. And I hit my mark. I said I was going to let you go early, and I am early. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to give you one last opportunity. Is there anything that you want to say before you go that you want folks to know?
Well, definitely. We know that the school board is really responsible for, plays a vital role in determining the policies and practices for the educational outcome of our students in the district. Education is paramount for me, and once again, I'm running for school board because I believe in the importance of ensuring that every child receives a quality education and the opportunity to attend a high performing school. And so, one of the things in my district, I want to look at how do we replicate what works in the district, because right now, there are 12 schools in District 1, and 9 of those schools are K through 8, and 67% of those schools have a D or F school performance score. That has to be changed, right? So we need to look at how do we improve? How do we replicate what's working? If we talk about Act 91, that talked about replication. So how do we replicate what's working? How do we duplicate what is working? And so we definitely need to look at doing that. But I am passionate about this work. And that is one of the reasons why I'm running for school board. And I just want to say thank you, Indivisible, for allowing me to be here to kind of share my platform. And once again, I'm Dr. Patrice Sentino. I am number 119 on the ballot. If you live in District 1, we'll definitely love your vote and support.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sentino. Thank you for your time. Thank you for putting yourself forth to serve our community. I have great respect for everyone that runs for public office. It is not an easy process and takes up a lot of your time. And I encourage everyone to vote. We have forums coming up for most of the rest of the school board races. Tomorrow, we'll be right back here at 7:30 with District 2 and those candidates. And we'll see you all then. Thank you guys for your time. And thank you for your time, Dr. Sentino.
Thank you.